Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Godakanda.
Yes, good afternoon, Tushara. He's our resource person, Mr. Tushar Asramana, and hope other participants also already join with us. Today, we will commence the program in Certificate in Branch Operations Management. It's actually hope all of you are IBSL members. The Institute of Bankers of Sri Lanka is a statutory body incorporated by Act of Parliament. Our chairman and vice chairman are from the central bank. They are deputy governor of the central bank and an assistant governor of the central bank. And our governing board members consisting of CEOs of most of the banks, including Bank of Ceylon, People's Bank, National Savings Bank, Sampath Bank, Ceylon Bank, like that. Normally, IBSL conducts core programs in IABF and DABF. In addition, we are conducting diploma and certificate programs like that. This is one of annual certificate program conducted by the IBSL, the Certificate in Branch Operations Management. This program consists of 5 modules, and today we will conduct the module named Credit Management. Your resource person is Mr. Tushara Asuramana. He is one of the most experienced lecturer attached to our IBSL faculty. So is currently working in the National NTB and Nations Trust Bank, Vice President, SME Credit Management, and he counts more than 10 years working experience, lecturing experience in IBSL. Professionally, he's an engineer. He has the first class in BSc Engineering degree from University of Moratuwa, and he has the MBA, ACMA, and Bachelor's degree in Management Studies, and also he has the Certified Expert in the SME in Finance, issued by the Frankfurt School of Management and Finance. Mr. Tushara is an excellent lecturer attached to our faculty. He knows how to deliver the sessions to the candidates and gain the evaluation from the candidate, from the participants too. In addition to Mr. Tushar Asraman, our resource panel consisting of 3 most experienced lecturers, namely Mr. Susanta Caldera, he is the former AGM Cargill's Bank, and Mr. P. Srikanth, he is from HNB, Head of Financial Institutions, and Mr. Banu Vijayaratna, he is the AGM HNB Finance. The certificate in branch operations management is program, 48 hours program. And finally, we will give to evaluate you, we will give the final examination paper. It's a 3-hour written paper. And to pass this certificate program, you have to earn 51 marks. And for that 65, the merit pass and the distinction pass is 81 marks. Thank you, Mr. Tushar Asramana, explain invitation and come today to deliver the credit management module. And I would like to invite you to commence the program now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Godakanda, Director, IBSL. And very good afternoon, team. Basically, now today we are going to start the first unit, that is credit management. And as Mrs. Godakanda briefly outlined you on the overview of the credit management, the certificate course in branch operations. So the first unit is basically the credit management, for which we are planning to conduct 3 Sundays. Today actually we started from 2 o'clock, but regular classes is going to start Sunday 1:30 p.m. onwards. Since that we have a couple of the students, first we try to get an kind of the brief idea about your background. You can speak up through mic or you can text me. Now basically we have Achini, Anjani, Anjani, Chaminka, Chatura, Eranga, and Ireshi, Prasad, Kushan, and Samita. Right. Achini, which bank are you attached to?
STB Bank.
Right. Actually, you are into the branch banking, or you are like into back office, or which is your specialization?
Branch operation sides.
Very good. Then what about Anjani? Anjani, which bank you are representing? What about Chaminka? Which bank you are representing? Or rather, Chatura, which bank you are attached to? Chatura Gunaratna?
I'm from DFCC Bank.
Right. Chatura, you are also from branch operations, so you are like operations area, or you are
Currently working in the credit cards processing department.
okay. Have you been into exposed to branch operations, or like credit department or branch operations?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Iranga, which bank you are from?
Sir, I'm actually under an undergraduate student.
I can't hear you, Iranga.
We are undergraduate students.
Undergraduate, right? Fine. So you are attached to which university?
University of Colombo, Department of
Colombo.
Finance.
Right. So what's the like area of specialization, Iranga?
Specialized in finance.
Okay, good. Harshani, good afternoon. Which bank you are representing? Harshani, which bank you are representing?
SBB Bank.
Right. You are into branch operations, or like or which area, like
Credit operation.
credit operations, like centralized role, right? STB, I think credit operations is centralized, right? Like most
Yes.
other. Okay, okay, good. Ireshi, which bank you are representing?
NDP Bank.
NDB. So
Yeah.
are you into branch banking?
Yeah, branch banking. SBA.
Right. SBA, very good. So probably you might have conducted, undergone maybe IBSL initial like IABF course, or have you not
I
attempted?
completed IABF, but
Right.
not completed DABF.
So you are probably planning the DABF simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
Good. Jude, good afternoon. Which bank you are representing, Jude?
Good afternoon, sir. I am also an undergraduate, sir.
Right. So which university?
From University of Colombo and specializing in finance.
Very good.
Ranga's batchmates.
Very good. Very good. We have friends also, right? Prasad, what about you?
Good evening, sir. I'm from HNB.
Right.
Currently working in operation department.
Right. So you haven't been any exposure to credit area?
I just have only 9 months experience in credit, all other operations.
Very good. Kushan, what about you, Kushan?
Hello, good afternoon, sir. I'm working in HNB.
Right.
And attached with the HNB Connect, mainly goes with all the online apps, which means digital banking.
Bit of like IT area.
No, actually, I'm working in the admin portal of Server.
Okay, fine. Samita, good afternoon. Which bank you are representing?
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, I am also undergraduate at University of Colombo.
Right. So, very good. Now we haven't gotten feedback from Chaminka and Anjani. Chaminka, which bank? Anjani, which bank you are representing? Okay, no problem. So, like basically now we have members, some from banks, some from universities, like undergraduate, and also like we have a couple of like experience into branch banking, maybe credit operations, and cards, and maybe like admin, right? So that is basically means that none of you are basically into the in detail credit operation, like credit management, or maybe like credit officer role. So that is also good, right? Means that so we can start from the sessions from the beginning, and go into the like very basic. So that might help you to understand, since that you haven't been exposed to direct credit like application like credit appraisal officer role, but no worries, right? So because we try to do it from the beginning, and then as much as possible we try to use some kind of experience that everybody is having, so they make this the online sort of sessions being more interesting, because it's very difficult to conduct online classes compared to physical classes, like to teach credit management, right? So credit is something that more interesting when you like discuss more physically with kind of a case studies and experience being shared, but no harm. So situation has demanded us to conduct classes online. So let's see how best that we can impart, we can share our knowledge, experience, in order to make your knowledge level to the next levels, right? As Mrs. Godakanda suggested, yes, this is like a 48-hour course where 12 hours for the credit management, and ultimately we have to face a kind of uh, examination paper, but don't worry that about the the credit paper. So whatever I am going to give you is basically I am trying to put it in a way that that is not a hurdle for you, because whatever we are discussing in the class, which is in my tudes, will be your questions, right? I'm not going to put things outside and make your life difficult, right? Because this is not exactly test your knowledge in terms of examination. This is try to make a kind of more experience, sharing experience, getting kind of idea about what's exactly happening in the credit or the credit management area. So that's what we need, because since that most of you are employed except 3 of you, but means that you need to get sort of experience exposures rather than memorizing something and passing the exams like IABF and DABF. So that's like the kind of objective. So let's see that how best that we can make use of this 12-hour period commencing from today, right? The next one is like, it's a kind of the request, wherever like when we are discussing some the content, if you do have any ambiguity or you need a clarification, please raise up, and you can put a text message or you can speak up, right, and try to get that sorted out at the whatever the time that we are discussing, because even later stage you can come back and you can get that it clear, but don't be sort of kind of reserved sort of thing. So anyway, you just talk to me and get it clear, right? So because if I am unable to give a kind of explanation, so we'll refer and come back with next time to answer your questions, because this is like always should be something interactive, right? Session, right? Not I'm going to tell something and you are listening, so that's not the way. If you do have anything so to add what I am telling, may have your experience, may have your feedback, right? So it could be better, it could be beneficial to the rest of the team as well, right? So that is kind of my request, and how that is how that I I am going to conduct in the session, right? So give me a minute, I will share the can you see the screen? Can somebody?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Right. So basically, what we are trying to discuss here is credit management. So the title, the topic is basically speaks about principles of credit management, lending policies and best practices is the part one. So before coming to the part one, and then I will let you know what exactly we are trying to discuss during the this 3-day period. So introduction to credit, type of borrowers and business sectors, which is maybe the part 1, and part 2, guidelines for good lending, classification of advances and branding of loan products, and the part 3 could be credit appraisal and risk management. So that is basically what I'm planning to discuss during this 3-day period, right? Okay. Now we try to understand something about the credit, right? So before moving to the credit, right? So definitions, right? Let's see, right? To understand like this. Now, why that we want to know this credit management? Why do you think that this is necessary? Why do you want to learn credit or credit management or lending? Any suggestion? Why? Before that, in a bank, what are the key areas in a bank? One can say, obviously, operations, at which most of you are involved with. The another pillar could be a treasury. Another pillar could be credit. So in terms of bank, if you can segregate the key functions in a bank, it could be a credit, operations, and treasury. When you say operations, yes, you have back office to front office to branch to admin to, yes, there are several sub functions under the operation. Credit also you can see depending on the organizations. You have retail credit, SME credit, leasing credit, consumer credit, corporate credit. So like that, there may be different arms under the credit pillar also, right? So why we need credit? Any thoughts? Loans, advances, we will term it a different way. Why we need to undertake credit in a bank? Any thoughts? මොකටද අපි මේ ණය දෙනවා එහෙම නැත්නම් ODs දෙනවා? අයි අපි මේ ක්‍රෙඩිට් කියන ෆන්ක්ෂන් එක ගැන මෙච්චර මහන්සි වෙලා කතා කරන්නේ?
We are earning by lending.
Yes, very good. You are earning by lending. Very good point. Otherwise, what we could do, we can get money from people called depositors, and we can invest in another organizations like government treasury bill, treasury bonds, or maybe another institutions like ADB, World Bank, right? There may be another organizations that you can invest, right? So that you can do, right? So you can borrow in the sense you can get the deposits and you can keep them in instruments where you can get a margin, right? That's a one function, right? But are we satisfied by doing that? No. As you suggested, yes, we need to lend them to the people called borrowers. That could be something, one of the bank's key functions. So because banks, we are acting as intermediaries, depositors, funds, and we will give it to lenders or borrowers with the margin, right? We try to make some profit out of there also, but it's one of our main functions. Hence that, yes, we need credit, right? And operations, why we import operations? Because in order to support this credit function, we need operations, right? Because yes, branch is there, you take deposits, you lend it, but the rest of the people supports that function, right? So without systems, without branch other operations, without head office support, you can't, survive the credit function. So the credit and operations hands on hand is going as, one activity. Then treasury, because they are there to tell you about, the sourcing, right? At what cost you are trying to get the money, right? About, you might have heard about in every bank about ALCO, a committee where they decide, the pricing, deposits price, credit lending prices, right? Because they manage the profitability, cost of funds, margins, when to seek deposits, where to seek, right? So these three pillars are very much important and interconnected also. But today we are trying to learn about the credit function, the importance of the credit function, who is involved in the credit function, how we are going to define the credit function. When you talk about the credit, who are there to play with? You have borrowers, you have type of credits, you have type of securities, right? So a lot of things are there. So try to, learn, and also you try to understand the interconnection between these things. Okay. There's another question. Now, we know why the credit is there. As you suggested, yes, because we are there to lend money. When you lend money, we call is a function credit management, sanctioning. We will learn it more perfectly in time to come, right? So though we have a function called credit management, who are the stakeholders here? Obviously there may be borrowers, right? And there should be lenders. So we are lenders, there are borrowers also. So one question, right, before we are starting credit, right, one question is, say you are a branch manager, you are a credit manager. In front of you, there is a person who has come to take a loan from you. Okay, very simple question. What are you going to do being in front of this borrower? You want to assess him, right, to see how good he is for this credit. We call it more professionally credit worthiness. We might say about his willingness, right? So we try to measure his credit worthiness. The challenge here is you need to know about credit principles, credit procedures, credit policies in order to judge the worthiness of this individual. That's why we try to learn credit, because when you say you are into operations, one could ask, why that you want to learn credit, right? Say you are in admin, so somebody would ask and say, so you are doing administration job, why we need to do a kind of a credit? You might be undergraduate, but you are trying to seek a job in bank, then why would you learn credit? Because fundamentally, though you are in a credit pillar or not, it is good that if you can understand how the credit works, what is this credit management, and what value addition you can give to the rest of the staff who are doing credit, being non-credit person. So that's what we try to understand these principles. Because let's say your credit manager interviewing a credit requiring person, and you can hear dialogue. Sometimes your passive observation would work. The win-win proposition for the customer and the bank. Maybe the credit officer might miss some of the very important things. That's a part and parcel of a job. But though you are not the direct credit guy in the branch, you can make some support. Being knowing some this credit principle. That is, we try to understand this, the credit and credit principles. Finally, now please remember, though we learn these definitions, models, theories, right, may not exactly applicable on most of the occasions. Then why we are learning this? But when you try to learn this, when you know this principle, it is easy for you to understand the situation because through your experience, so then you try to make decisions in different situations. Let's say I've been a credit officer for about 10 to 15 years. So with that 10 to 15 years credit experience, back with this, the fundamentals, these models, these theories, you can straight away tell when new customer comes, no, this guy is good for exposure. This guy is, good for this type of exposures. So that comes through experience, right? That's what we say when the DGM, met a kind of a person, he might say, yes, we will give. But as a branch manager, you wonder, so how can this, DGM tells this is okay for exposure? Probably he might have dealt with different individuals during his career, and then he's having that exposure, especially when you are dealing with retail customers, small and medium, low end. Obviously, so you are dependent on their behavior, their track record, right? Because they can't give you proofs to you like corporate customer gives you. They don't have financials, they don't have business plans, they don't have marketing plan, they don't have about future forecasted financials. So that's how they operate. But looking at their behaviors, you can tell exactly, right, this guy's how they're operating. Oh, they are into the kind of, say, paddy milling, cultivation, paddy stocking, right? This is how they work. So based on that, right, you can say this is good for this. It's not a defaulter. So that is the most important thing of this learning, right? So I have just briefed you some early thoughts for you to make some further thinking on why we learning credit. As I said, it is not for the exam. I mean, obviously, you don't have any worry with the passing the exam. I will guarantee, because it's not a big deal. But importance is, try to get as much as possible during this course, even after that. So even after the course, if you think that credit is your interest, then try to read articles, refer books, talk to your colleagues in the branches, and see what you can learn beyond what we are discussing here. So that's good. So everybody knows that when you are qualified with credit experience, it's easy to find a good position in a bank than maybe operations, for example. And because why? Because credit with experience, values a lot. So see whether that you can go to that level as well, right? So learning, getting experience, getting qualified, and you can even move out from operations to credit and maybe treasury. So it's a different area where when you are trying to do all those things, probably you might have a good employment opportunity also. So there are so many things that we can get by doing this type of a course. Okay, having said that, so we try to formally understand what is credit and credit management. So in the meantime, if you do have any questions so far what we have done, please raise. Any clarifications? Okay, please raise, please ask any questions if you do have anything, because just like, you know, these are not very difficult areas, but only thing is you need to question, you need to get more and more information in the current context. So then only you will be able to make a kind of more a practical credit person, right? So then we move to credit. In finance, credit is granting of a loan and the creation of a debt. Credit means loans and advances. Because credit is something we give a loan to a customer and we create a debt through agreement, right? So informally, you have a borrower, you have a lender. Lender and borrower come to an agreement with respect to a credit, which is loans or advances, and in turn, the borrower is supposed to pay, if it is a loan, the capital and the interest as agreed rate and agreed period. So that's how we see in a more formal way loan, advance or credit. But in a commercial transaction, we talk about credit is a delayed payment. Say you sell, you are an entrepreneur, you sell some produce to third parties called debtors, and then you allow some period them to repay. So that period we call debtors period. So by allowing that delayed payment mechanism, we interpret as a credit in commercial transaction. So like in finance, a credit is defined one way. In commercial trade, credit is defined another way. But what do you call the credit management? Means whether it is in a finance or whether it's in a commercial transaction, you are managing that process, right? Appropriately managing these cases we call as credit management. That's the important thing, because just like giving loans in terms of customers, it is not credit. Lending is not credit. Lending is part of the credit. You have to lend and you have to recover, very simply. Then lending and recovering both together, we can say managing. But there are so many other things also, like acquiring customer, bit of marketing, right? And then approving, assessing the credit, then dispersing the credit, and then following up the credit, finally recovering the granted amount could be some of the activities in this credit chain. So managing all activities effectively and efficiently will be the credit management, right? So not only lending, not only recovery. So we talk about operations. Yes, operations is part of this credit chain. That's why we want them to be in this credit activity. Sometimes people would think, we are the bosses, we are the important people in organizations like banks. That's how the credit people perceive. No, it is not. Because in order to be successful in this credit chain, somebody has to go out and bring good customers. For that, marketing support should be there. When you are bringing, yes, approving and dispersing everything done maybe by the credit pillar. But what about the credit administration department? What about the branch operation department? What about the legal department? What about the treasury? What about the risk department? So everybody play a different role in this credit chain, right? But we generally hear lending is as credit. Giving loan, we will perceive as credit. No. What is most important thing is the credit management, that is predominantly provisioning and recovery. Provision of credit, accommodating of credit, granting of credit is one major function. And recovery, timely recovery, following it up, this underlying credit is also very important item. As I told you, you have to carry out it effectively and efficiently. At no point of conducting it without efficient. Because somebody would say, I will approve a loan in 3 months. Is it efficient? No. Probably customer needing money within 2 to 3 weeks. But you take more than 3 months to approve a credit. Probably by that time, customers' credit requirement has diminished, reduced, zeroing. But you approve in 3 months. So it doesn't tell you it's efficient. But on the other side, effective. Now, you give a credit, but at very low margin. Or you give credit to very risky segments without having adequate margin. So it doesn't attract you, doesn't give you enough profit, enough service charge for your companies, for your banks' income. So it means it's not effective, right? So whatever you are going to do, it should be effective and efficient, right? Then finally, it's a win-win. Lend and borrow. This process should be win-win because it is not only good for borrower, not only good for lender. So both parties should be fulfilled. The requirements to be fulfilled. So then only we say credit as a process successful. So in brief, the credit management is granting of credit and recovery of the same should be undertaken effectively and efficiently. It's a win-win proposition for both lender and the borrower. That's what, how you see the credit management process. Though we have mentioned with 2 items, as I mentioned earlier, it's a combination of several activities from customer acquisition to debt recovery, loan recovery. There are multiple activities in the credit chain. So managing all the activities effectively and efficiently is the credit management. So now we know what is credit and what is credit management. So we try to understand the importance of credit for economies like Sri Lanka emerging economics, third world countries economic, SME economies, right? So we try to understand that. So before that, any questions? Any question? Any thoughts? Any views? Is it clear? Achini? Eranga?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. If you have any questions, please raise and then we will discuss it further before moving to the further slides. Okay, right. Now we see imports. Now, if you take individual, say you want to put up a house, what you can do? You might have some savings, and then you try to purchase a land, plot of land, and then approve the kind of a building plan for your house, and then you are putting up your house. Now, say if you don't have adequate money, then what you're going to do? You can go to your parents, you keep thanking relatives, friends, or finance company or a bank to get some credit to complete this. Because without that, you can't complete this. That's about this micro perspective, individual perspective. Similarly, in a country, in an economy, where the credit can play a pivotal role, major role, to support it by performing some of these activities. The first one, savings, consumption, investment. It's very common and you might have heard CIS, consumption, savings, investment, savings. Because in an economy, yeah, we need to consume, we need to invest, we need to save. But in order to do that, somebody has to give support. That support is the credit support in terms of economic growth. Example, if you take some of the beneficiaries, now how the government support them is, so initially the government was, is basically giving some financial support. It's a kind of, say, credit. Now, as a result, they use it, plus they do different activities, and then they do bit of investments also, right? Maybe the direct support would have gone initially with consumption, and then some of the activities resulted opening the Vinaguma, some of the bank, and some savings are coming there, and again some investment, maybe a small level. And that similarly, if you take about a country, we try to get money, say as a foreign loans, say to put up a harbor, to put up an airport, highways, right? And then that will come here, make as investment, and then it gives the rest of the economic players to perform like that. So the credit code give a support in the economy for consumption, investment, and savings. That's one important thing that we can consider. Formal, informal lending. Informal lending is basically by the money lenders or the parties not registered with formal authorities. And formal lending is basically by the organizations who are registered with banking license. So formal informal lending is itself is a credit, right? Banks, they lend, they provide credit because that activity is needed to support this economy, entrepreneurs. Third one, take off economic growth and development. Economic growth and economic development is being supported by this credit sanctioning. Employment creation, that's another one. So create employment. So that's why every government is trying to promote SMEs, promote banks to lend SMEs, insist banks to lend export sector. Why? Because it can create number of employment opportunities. Finally, SME development. There are so many SME businesses across the island and then in different industries. By providing credit, providing financial support, accommodating loans and advances, then these SMEs can flourish, they can grow. So ultimately, as a team, as a cluster, so they develop. So basically, you take an economy. So what we need to do is grow the economy. These are something that we can do to grow the economy, to support the economy. In terms of these activities, so credit is performing an important role, right? So these slides tell you why credit is important to a country, to an economy, to a country like Sri Lanka, country like a developing status, right? So this is basically why we undertake credit function as banks. So next one is we try to understand what are the major sources and uses, right? Because as initially, as one of you suggested, we are here to lend money, right? Because rather than taking deposits and investing, we take deposits and lend money to the needy individuals, right? So if you are thinking how we are getting this money, how we are getting the funds, only from the borrowers? No, there may be some other sources also. So we need to know that. What are the sources, right? Say own capital. Whatever the bank is going to start their operations, they need initial capital. That's what we call own capital. So in addition, we get deposits from the depositors. It could be demand deposit, like current account. It could be savings, including minor. It could be time deposits, FDs, foreign currency. So there are so many sources, and ultimately we get it as deposits. Third one, borrowed funds. We as banks go to other institutions, other entities, and we borrow funds. Like example, one of your Achini, I suppose, you are working, say SDB. Say SDB wants some money to on-lend. So SDB can go to IFC and get a credit line. SDB can go to Nation Trust Bank and get some credit. SDB can go to NDB and get the money. So they borrow it. So like there may be credit lines, maybe like IFC and like that, there may be credit lines approved. Refinancing, Central Bank, Asian Development Bank, they provide refinancing credit. And through the banks, through the finance companies, it will be on lend to needy individuals. Debenture issues. Now, recently, we have seen many banks like Ceylon, they have advertised debentures. Sampat Bank, in today papers, they had advertised to issue debentures to support their, tier 2 capital requirements. And our banks are now allowed to go to foreign organizations, foreign banks for euro or dollar borrowings. That is a borrowing funds also, borrowed funds also. The final source could be retained earnings, retained profits. Every year, banks making profit, and part of that being used to issue dividends to shareholders, and part of that will be taken over for next year as retained earnings, retained profits. That again made up the bank's capital. But that could be another source. So here we have several sources: capital, deposits, borrowed funds, retained profits, to name few. So in case if you got an, let's say, question for your paper, what are the sources where a bank can get funding? So you can name with these examples. Right. Any questions? Okay. Then users. What are the users of these funds we obtain through different sources? One could be SRR, statutory reserves, because the central bank time to time requested us to maintain some reserves, because in order to protect the depositors, protect the banking system, to address some liquidity, right? They will ask us to maintain some statutory reserves. Then we also need to maintain the liquidity of the bank. For that, we are supposed to keep some money in terms of cash, in terms of TB, we call SLAR, liquid asset reserves. That's another utilization component in these funds. Thirdly, most common one is we provide funding, credit facilities to the customers. That is also you can observe in almost all banks. Major component of your deposits are represented as the loans and advances. Then investment banking, where we can invest in other institutions. It could be something about debt investment or equity investment. Either way, so we can invest the money we are received as capital or other forms of sources. Finally, fixed assets. Some banks are running their head office and branch offices in rented premises, but some banks have their own premises purchased. Vehicles, other machinery may be being purchased using the funds. So now we learn about major sources and also major users. So this is like not very much important, but it's good to have an idea how we get the funding and where we are using, because then only we know, right, the cost of this funding. Otherwise, if you don't have this idea, then if you are in the depositor side, you want to give maximum interest rate to the depositor and get the money. And then we are on the lending side, you want to give a lowest lending rate to a customer. So when you try to balance this, what could happen? Highest rate for depositors, lowest rate to the lenders mean, borrowers mean, you don't have adequate margin to run your organization. Because you need to see that, yes, you get the money, but when you are getting the money through deposits, you need to make sure your cost of funds to come acceptable level. So that's why we encourage CASA than time deposits, right? Because current accounts, zero cost for you. If you can, keep a lot of money in terms of current account balances than term deposit balances, the cost could come down drastically. Similarly, when your cost could come down in the sense your cost of funds are low, then you can go to the borrowers and make good margins. Ultimately, it gives you higher profits, higher retained earnings, and support the capital. So that's how you need to see this big picture. That's why, though you are not in a credit person, though you are in a branch operation, though you are in treasury operations, you need to understand how this system works. Then actually you can say, yes, it's good that you get money as deposits, but make a mix of it. Current account, savings accounts, minor savings, long-term, short-term, medium-term deposits. So you mix of that. Then you have a better control on the cost of funds. That's what we generally tries to do by knowing users as well as sources. Right. So before moving further, any questions? Any areas you need to know further? You can put a text or you can ask. Any questions? Is it clear? Jude?
Clear.
Clear. What about Prasad?
It's clear for me, sir.
Okay, right. So this anyway is not difficult, but I just want to make some initial understanding. Hope this is not boring for you, because since then most of you are starting from the scratch into the credit area. So I want to share those things from the basic. But if you do have any sort of clarifications or further sort of feedbacks, please let me know, so then we can work accordingly. Right. Now we move to type of borrowers and the type of business sectors. Right. So here it's the important part. Before we learn the type of borrowers in detail, I will try to make some experience out of this. Right. Why? What is the importance of knowing these borrowers? Why we need to know the borrowers? We'll have some discussion. Why we need to know the borrowers? Jude?
To understand their specific needs.
Yeah, to understand the specific needs. Good point. Kushan, why we need to understand the borrower? One thing is, yes, their purpose, a specific need of financing. Harshani, what do you think? මොකටද අපිට ඕනේ borrower අඳුර ගන්න? Jude, Kushan, Achini?
Credit worthiness.
Oh, credit worthiness, yes, that's another good point. Purpose, credit worthiness, anything? Raghunathan. Kushan, any thoughts? Jude, Ireshi?
To check the borrower is liable or not.
Yeah, borrower's liability. Right, good points. All correct actually. Now, I'll also share something to this extent. Now, when you say the borrower, yes, you can refer the textbooks and see who are the individual borrowers, who are the sole proprietors, who are the partnerships, who are the limited liability, public companies, right? Yes, you can read through and get their nature, right? So many things, right? But in practical sense, what we need to know is later that we will discuss in the second session also. Their creditworthiness. That's what the most important thing. The purpose, their liability kind of thing, right? So those are the important things for us. So why we say those things are important? Ultimately, what we want to make them accountable, or what we want them to do to repay the loan or service advance without any default, right? Timely servicing, because then only you can get the money back, and you can use that the money, right, and make further advances or lend. That's what generally we do, right? Now, when you say these borrowers, we need to understand their nature, right? How they operate, what are the pluses they have, what are the minuses they have. So depending on that, you talk about how good this individual, good this borrower for the proposed credit. ඒක තමයි අපේ ඔළුවේ හැම වෙලේම වැඩ කරන්නේ. එහෙම නැතුව එයා individual කෙනෙක්, එයා sole proprietor කෙනෙක්, limited liability company එකක්. That doesn't make a big sense. On paper, yes. On theory, yes. There may be so many advantages, disadvantages. You can talk so many things. Yes, that's we need to know. But before that, you need to understand a reality of who this borrower, what's its nature, what's the creditworthiness. Is this person is good for this exposure? That's why we try to learn these borrowers other than the theory, other than the textbooks approach. That's what is important for the credit guy. Now, just take an example. Say, individual person. As he is running a boutique shop. Now, he say is the key man is running this shop. Say he is 60 years of age old. He is having different business experience exposures other than this boutique shop. Suppose now you want to give him a loan, say 250,000 per se, purchase some stocks and to do some modification to his say boutique shop. So what do you think? How do you feel based on the whatever the information that I just shared? How do you think? How do you feel is good for this exposure? Is not good for this exposure? Do we need further information? What do you think? Can somebody share your thoughts? Individual, 60 years of age, great exposure to this, running a boutique shop, single owning one man, asking money for working capital and capex. These are the 5 or 6 things that we just, let's say the customer come in and meeting you, and he said, I am so and so, I'm putting like this, I want this 2,000. So what do you think?
We need further information.
We need further information. Okay. So based on the information what he has so far produced, what do you think? What are the pluses? What are the minuses?
The negative thing is his age.
Age. Okay.
So we can check for whether he can give the loan jointly.
Okay.
If he has a son or anyone who is partnering the business.
Very good. In terms of experience, now it says he's having a great number of years exposed to different business activities, including running a boutique shop. Is a positive or it's a negative?
It's positive, but we have to check the past records.
Past records, whether what type of business he has been into, and whether he has successfully, conducted those businesses, right? Like
Yes.
that. So we need to have those. Very good. And what about he's been the key man? He's running the show, one man, right? What do you think?
That is also kind of negative.
Negative, yes. There are some positives also, like when he's trying to take a decision, he takes decision very quickly. That's good in terms of some business activities. But in the flip side of that is, because he is the one person, he is a key man, right? He takes all the decisions which may good or right or wrong. Or if something happens to him, probably that could be end of the business operation. So like that, you see, when you say the individual running a boutique shop, 60 years old with a vast number of exposure, he running one man show and asking working capital plus capex, that itself gives you some mixed feelings, right? Some pluses, some minuses, some further information. So we try to establish his credit worthiness. So that's what we need to learn through these borrowers, right? Not only say the advantages, disadvantages of individual guy, sole proprietor, partnerships, company, that doesn't make a bigger contribution to your credit decision. But yes, it is good for writing an answer, but practically it is not so. Now let's say now there's a company, say ABC company, and runs this boutique shop. Now they come. Now they're asking a kind of a similar loan. But if you go by the textbook, says a company is different to individual, is established, or maybe illegally you can sue the company, and directors are different, right? A company is better than the individual. But when you see practicality, let's say now, though this is a ABC company, but behind that Again, the one individual is running the show. And only the difference between the individual to the company is just the formation of a company. But when you see the company balance sheet, there's nothing called assets or net worth, because everything is under the name of the director, which is an individual. And then you compare these two scenarios, you don't see a much difference, right? In terms of credit risk, in terms of exposure, in terms of creditworthiness. There are some pluses, yes, because it's a company compared to this. But now, in a big picture, when it comes to the decisions, when it comes to the other activities, we need to understand who the real players. You getting my point? So that is important in terms of credit decision, right? That's why I was telling you, yes, good to know borrowers, but it's equal to know what are the features, nature of these borrowers. Let's say when we talk about partnerships, one or two people put together, formally or informally, they form the partnership and run it. But there again, some positives, right? Instead of one guy, now decisions are being made by 2-3 individuals. That's a positive side. But the negative side also, when 2-3 guys together, if some disagreements happening, would have a negative impact on running the partnerships. So then again, we need to see whether the formal, agreed, registered partnerships is there, how the investment is taking place, how the profits being shared, how the decisions are being made, right? Whether it's like total agreement, whether it's partly agreed, who are authorized to run the account operations, authorized signatories. So a lot of things now you need to look into, not by the name, right? That is what I need to emphasize, highlight. Type of borrowers are there, but most important thing is we need to understand who actually runs the show, who actually performs the activities in a particular business entity. Or it could be a individual, partners, company, limited liabilities. Yes. So it's our duty to see who makes decisions. Then we can say the risk is this one. We need to focus on these areas. Okay. So when you understand it for that, then we can see several type of borrowers. Individuals, joint borrowers. We have sole proprietorship. We have partnerships. We have private limited companies, public limited, statutory bodies, societies, right? So there may be different rules govern for their business activities, business entities. Yes, that's good to know. When it comes to lending, we need to understand it's a partnerships. It has to be registered under partnership agreement under this English law. It's a company registered under 2007 Act. Then there should be articles of association, registered business address, director's details, and so Form 46, like so, everything is there. Then public limited, quoted, non-quoted, unquoted companies. Their features. It is good that you try to learn, try to understand those things, right? But again, I must say, we need to understand who are these people and what are their behaviors. and how the unit entity is comprised. Then we can say how good for this guys, for this exposure. So as a exercise, what you could do is, let's say, now take an example. Right? Take an example. Now there may be a sector called agriculture, and within that there is a subsector paddy. Right? Now let me get an idea from you. What are the business activities in this main sector agri, subsector paddy? Say, paddy cultivation we say. Now, what are the business activities? Before we understand the borrowers, what are the business activities we can find in this paddy cultivation? Say you are a branch manager attached to Kadurvela. Say you are a credit manager or branch manager. Now, head office has asked to come up with a plan for lending to paddy sector, because you need to manage, you need to meet the requirement of 10% agri ratio. Then Kadurvela, Vavuniya, Anuradhapura. So identified is like, potential business potential branches to undertake some paddy related lending. Okay. Now, first we understand what is the sector agri. Number 2, paddy cultivation. Now, what are the business activities? Can somebody suggest? What are business activities that one can suggest? What are the business activities? Can somebody suggest? We say agri, main sector, paddy cultivation is the subsector. What are the business activities within this parameter? Say you are a credit manager. Now you need to come up with some activities. Now, because your task is to identify the different type of borrowers in this sector. Right.
Pledge loans.
First come with the business activity of the product.
Purchasing and selling
Accounts.
paddy.
Pardon?
Purchasing and selling paddy.
I didn't get selling paddy. මට ඇහුණා මොකද මුලින් කිව්වේ?
Purchasing and
selling. So that we can say that business is something buying and selling, or maybe processing, right? Processing of value. And the other one could be, sorry, we can say purchasing and selling. It's a trading, right? It's a, one activity is trading. Another one, what we can do. What you suggested is just bulk purchase and bulk sale. That's one activity. Another activity could be stocking. Yeah, you can stock paddy and keep some time. After that period, you can sell this to another miller. Right? Stocking. Any other? Cultivation itself is another activity, right? In a paddy, you have farmers who do cultivation, right? So cultivation. Third one. Another one. Think what are the activities we can find in this paddy sector, because now you are trusted to develop a plan, right? So we need to understand the borrowers. So before we understand the borrowers, we need to know what are the business activities.
Buying the fertilizer.
Yes, but I will say trading fertilizer, right? Because they are maybe there you can say import, local purchase, and ultimately sell, trade. So we'll say trading fertilizer. If you can so import it and distribute, or you can purchase it from the bulk importers and you can sell another business activity. Right? What else?
Transportation.
Transportation. What about
transporting goods or
right? So we can say transportation. That could be something in terms of we take vehicles, machines, right? Because right, stocking, buying and selling, transporting, cultivating, trading, fertilizer. Anything else? The most important part. What about milling? There are so many millers, right? You get the paddy, you value it, you put it as a rice, right? And you sell it, right? Rice milling, right? Any other? What about the exporting? There are maybe some, high-end people in this paddy sector. They can export some of this produce. They might purchase from the, the millers, and they put it, bags kind of thing, and then they export, right? Exporting. And then something about what about the other services into this segment? Or polybags, right? I mean, so many other ancillary services provision also can do, right? We'll say ancillary services. Right. Now what we have done here, we try to understand the agri sector, paddy subsector, business activities. So that's how we try to develop, we try to focus, target these borrowers. So we have trading of paddy, we have stocking of paddy, we have cultivating of paddy, we have fertilizer sort of trading, transportation, rice milling, exporting, ancillary services. We have identified 8, even there may be more than that. Right. Now, let me get your views on who are the borrowers under these segments. Let's say come to buying and selling or trading paddy. Who could be the potential borrowers here? Could there be individuals? Could there be sole proprietors, partners, limited liability companies, right? Everybody can be there, right? When it comes to stocking, cultivating not, yeah, cultivating also there may be limited liability companies. They can, come in as a bulk. They can, rent out some properties and they do the cultivation, right? Now what we are trying to do here is, so we first understand business activity, then we try to map the borrowers. Then it is easy to understand the risk profile of these people. Now example, now let's say an individual is now trying to do some cultivation, and then a company trying to do a cultivation. how do you see the proposition? Let's say individual, yes, he can cultivate a land, but he needs a very big line or he needs a smaller line. And if so, why? And if the company wanted to harvest, cultivate, do they need a small loan or do they need a big loan? Now, how do you see this in practical perspective? Let's say an individual come in and telling you he want to cultivate 50-acre land and he want some big amount. But simultaneously, the company, let's say, establish whatever other data also provide. Now they also come and say, we also want to cultivate 50-acre land on, say, rental basis, leasehold basis, say both proposition. Now, how do you see which is more appealing to you? Which is more attractive to you? What is more risky to you? What is more less risky to you on this proposition? Assume you have some other data.
Individual.
Individual, you are happy with to proceed? Or individual is bit risky in this case?
Individual is risky, I feel.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. What about others? Ushan, what do you think? Samita? I know sure that we need some more information, but going whatever in your gut feeling, what do you think? Harshini? Hireshi, what do you think? Why that you think individual is bit risky comparatively a company?
Most of the time, individuals depends on the external factors also,
Okay.
like water, raining, fertilizers, and government concessions.
Right.
But as a company, there are risk is less
Right.
because it's depend on the internal factor. Actually,
Right. Yeah,
what level in fact?
Yeah, most of the time they are in a manageable situation because this is about like a 50-acre land. That's what I'm telling, because it's bit of, in terms of extent, a 50-acre land, though it's a leasehold or not, but individual running the particular operation could be risky due to so many factors. But if the company, probably, that's what I was still telling you, is a kind of established, we have some other data also with us, but then we can more dependable in company running that operation. So I just want to know, what do you like the idea where on the face of it, you can't say individual is good, company is good, individual is bad, company is bad, so you can't do that. So you need to get into the business. So that is agri, paddy, there are activities, and then you see what is the business activity and who the prospective borrower. So sometimes you find rice milling done by individual customers. Again, rice milling done by companies. And when you are trying to compare, maybe company is doing much better compared to the individual running the rice milling, because they might now in the level of exporting or automated operation, whereas individual cannot go to that level due to lack of knowledge or lack of investment, so many things. Vice versa, there may be stable individual who are very much capable than some of the companies. If you take Dudley Sirisena, Nipuna, so though they call it as companies, but these one or two individuals controlling the rice market in Sri Lanka. But one or two individuals, they put a company, that's different. But they are much better than some of the companies who are in this paddy milling. Then you have to see, yes, individual and what are their capacities about net worth, about asset size, about experience, about the team. Yeah, one guy, but 50 years of experience in this trade makes them successful ventures. So, I mean, just looking at the profile of say individual, sole proprietor, partnerships doesn't give you a correct picture. So you need to see item by item, business by business, activity by activity, and see whether how best that they can do. What's the risk profile? Right? As Achini suggested, yes, you have to go into detail and see how best they organize their activities. Maybe the company may not be doing very well sometimes, but individual could do. But vice versa, individual cannot have everything connected together because doesn't enough capacity, not enough networking, not enough contacts. So you need to understand different businesses, and then you have to come up with a proper risk profile before you are deciding to finance or not. So here, just wanted to mention you about type of borrowers list, but important is you need to go into detail and you have to always take decisions in relative perspective, not the absolute perspective. When you say the absolute perspective, when you say individual, we might say it's not good. One man show. Taking own decisions which may have some impact to the business. When you say company, in absolute we say separate legal personality and much stable compared to individuals. And then there may be business plan, vision, mission statement. So that's the absolute level decision making. But when it comes to relatively, is you see interconnection of activities. Here we have seen the interconnection of sector, subsector, business activity, and the borrower. Only 4. But as well, then the interconnection will be complete. Say agri, paddy, rice milling, a company. So 4 players. Then we see the type of products. We'll later learn that. It could be short-term revolving. It could be pledge, as some of you suggested. It could be working capital. It could be a term loan, leasing. There will be multiple products. You try to map those things also. And then you see what is the type of security. The stock, personal guarantee, machinery mortgages, vehicle, this assignment of vehicles, then assignment of cash flows, rice mill itself. So then you have security one hand, you have credit one hand, you have borrowers one hand. BCS, we call them BCS model. Later we'll try to discuss that, like BCS model. So we see the interconnection between these 3 pillars: borrower, credit, and security. Within this big agri sector, within this paddy subsector, within that business activities. So we try to map BCS onto these three. Then you try to minimize the impact, the disadvantages you see earlier. Now, example, Vachini and some other suggested, Prasad suggested individual asking 50-year leasehold rights land to be cultivated is a risk, obvious. But if we can see what is the product we are going to give, let's say we try to give pledge loan, then security could be joint authority pledge. One. Number two, selling to Cargills or Kills payment assignment. Third, you provide seed, paddy and all that to some organization, directly delivered to this farmer who is having this 50-acre land. Probably as a security, you try to get that leasehold rights as a mortgage. Another plus point. You might see, kind of advisory services coming from the bank to work joining hands with the farmer. Now you can see how well that we have improved the risk profile of this particular guy. Earlier we might have rejected that proposal because farmer 50-acre, so many external factors. He may not be able to manage, but now as a bank with the system, now you try to minimize those impact on external release. Maybe the pricing, you try to work with Cargills or the Kills because they are in turn your corporate customers. And then standard price consistency for the next 6 to 1 year. And then payment assignments whenever he supplies. So payments come to your account and deducted and then give back. And then you work with some organization who provides seed, paddy and all that to there. You minimize that. You work with insurance companies to obtain a crop insurance. Now as a system that we are trying to work. You get my point? In that case, what we have done here is, earlier it's a risky proposition. Now it has come to acceptable level. Why? You try to map the borrower, credit, security aspects into sector, subsector, business activity proposal. Hope you understand. So that's what we need to do. I mean, we try to learn separately what is credit, what is borrower, what is type of credit, what is security, what is sector. Yes, that is good. But ultimately, by knowing all those things, when come to the field, when you are in the field, you need to understand what is a practical solution. What we need to give as a practical solution. Then you see exactly what is my lending proposition, what is the value proposition to the bank. Just giving loan to a cultivation loan to the farmer for a season and be it repaid after 6 months is not adequate proposition. You try to give a loan, long-term loan, short-term loan, insurance, vehicle or other some sort of machinery kind of thing, cash flow management, CASA minor savings accounts. Like you try to give a banking approach. In order to do a banking approach, you need to understand these 3 or 4 areas: which sector, which subsector, which activity, the borrower's features, product features, and security features. Try to interconnect everything. And then you can say, yes, we are in a position to finance this guy. We are in a position to accommodate some credit facility with this guy. So that's what generally we do at credit. That's what we call credit structuring. That's what we call credit management. So basically, so far we try to understand what is credit, imports of credit, sources, users, and the type of borrowers, and also in the lighter way we understand how we are going to map in this borrower needs to the credit needs in the presence of security. So we haven't done any sort of sort of examples, but we just discussed. What we could do is, like, we will take a small break about 10 to 15 minutes, and we will back in like it's 3:40. So we'll 3:55. So we'll join, and we will continue with rest of the presentation. And in the meantime, so you can read through what we have done, and if not, you can take also like 10-15 minutes break. So, and we will meet up 3:55. Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome back. Any questions, thoughts? Right. So what we have been discussing was like how to like understand borrowers' financing requirement, while we will be giving credits, type of credits, type of securities on the other hand, right? So standalone, we can't tell how good the customer or how creditworthy the customer without knowing what is in the offering and as against the proposed security. So we need to take all these three together, interconnected, then only we can take a kind of a viable proposition, rather managing provisioning of credit. So that need to keep it in your mind. So having said that, we'll try to understand what are the type of products. Later, actually, we try to go into detail, but here we try to understand what sort of products we can offer to these respective borrowers. Generally, we have consumer credit, commercial credit, development credit, international trade finance. When you say consumer credit, what do you mean by the consumer credit? Is basically lending products relating to consumer segment, retail segment. It could be personal loan, it could be credit card, it could be housing loan. So those are consumer type of financing. Now, in the early example, suppose agri sector, paddy subsector, a person is the individual who requiring funding for cultivation may have a requirement of consumption credit for him or for his related parties, right? So if he wants a housing loan, we can think of providing him a housing loan, not only a business loan. Now, if you take commercial credit, small and medium commercial loan, corporate loans, but he could be provided SME loan for financing capital expenditure as well as working capital expenditure. That's a commercial credit arm. But simultaneously, he could be appraised for consumption needs also. So as a bank, we need to see a overview, overall proposition. Because what could happen here is, say, you try to provide commercial lending and you may not, knowing the customer requiring some personal credit, hence that you disregarded that request. So the customer could go to some other bank and get a housing loan approved, which sometimes you miss because in case of a housing loan, a customer would pledge his property to get that housing loan. In case of a commercial loan, he might pledge his leasehold rights. But you miss the opportunity because you haven't gone into detail of his customer's consumer requirement, personal requirement. If you could have obtained if you could have given the housing loan, you would have taken a property as additional collateral in case of emergency as against the leasehold property. So that's what I'm telling. So overall, proposition is also needed. So we can't think alone that he is a farmer, he needs only the pledge loan, he needs only the cultivation loan. That is not correct. We need to think what is requirement. Now, earlier, actually, we have listed only the business requirement under this paddy sector. Similarly, when you see the type of borrowers, then again, you can revisit their funding requirements also. And their funding requirement could be consumption need as well as commercial need. Based on that, you can propose the type of credit which is most appropriate in the particular instant. There's another segment of credit we call development credit. We sometimes hear that we try to lend customers who are in the microfinancing segment, or micro entrepreneurs, right? And also we try to provide financing to the SME, high-end SME, corporate type of customers who want to start up a project. A project could be starting of a garment factory, tea factory, ice factory, hotel, right? It's something new which come up as from the scratch. For that, entrepreneurs needing money. So that sort of funding we call development financing. On top of that, we also come across financing to import and export segment. We call them international trade finance. That is about letter of credit. That is about import loan. That is about packing credit, bill purchasing, right? There are so many instruments, products in relating to international trade. So what we are trying to highlight here is we need to see a customer, a borrower requirement in detail, and we try to map their requirement with appropriate products. That is what we are trying to call as credit management, credit accommodation, managing the credit cycle. Though that I have not highlighted here, type of securities also play a vital role, because we have borrowers, we have credits, we have securities. BCS. When you take this BCS model interconnected, you come up with most appropriate win-win solution for the customer as well as for the bank. So that's what we just discussed on, mapping these, interconnecting these three pillars. So as a credit officer, credit manager, banker, we always need to take things in relative perspective, not the absolute perspective. And then when you take this BCS together and you can project it into sector, subsector, and business activity, or the activity of the particular segment. And then, so based on that, we can map this BCS into that, which ultimately you try to formalize your product requirement with the customer requirement in the presence of security instruments. That's what we need to take as the take-home point in this session so far. So as I was telling you, yes, theory is one, but practical application of that is a different one. So your expectations after completing this course would be how you analyze the customer requirement while managing the risk profile of the particular customer in terms to make adequate profitability towards the bank. That's what the credit officer's role. So in that context, yes, we need to take these aspects in a relative perspective to make a win-win proposition. Right. Hope you have got that. To actually taken some more time because I wanted to share these basics from the scratch. Otherwise, we can, straight away just go through these slides within 5-10 minutes, but I don't want to do that since you are not from the credit background, you are from the operations and the respective other background, so you need to have the good basic of that. But ultimately, what you need to take out of what we discussed is, yes, we need to know how we are understanding customer borrower's requirement while provisioning the credit loans and advances in the presence of securities. That's what we need to know, and that's what we need to practice. Hope you have got through, but anyway, in coming presentations also, we try to address this, we try to practice these concepts in using different instruments. Then we also try to understand, though we have...
Sir, can you again explain the BCS model? I can't touch that one.
Okay.
It's indicate what?
Yeah, BCS model is basically B is for borrower, C is for credit, S is for security. Actually, I haven't not listed any securities here, which I am planning to discuss in the session 2. But I have briefly mentioned about a type of credits here, type of borrowers here. So ideally, what we need to do in practice is we need to master this BCS model. Means you come across different customers. It could be individuals to public limited companies, day-to-day operation, and you try to provide products in your banking book, from overdraft to term loan to microfinancing to project finance, so many products. You are trying to map these products to this borrower's requirement. For your beauty, you have a thing called security. It could be cash, it could be property, it could be vehicles, shares, right? So use this security to manage the riskiness of this transaction while you map in the products to the customers. You come across some risk, you mitigate those risks using these securities. So when you take all those things, BCS model, it is something a credit management in very short. So we can, call it in different names, but ultimately we are trying to do here is knowing who are the borrowers, knowing who are the credit, knowing what are the securities. We need to interconnect these three to make a win-win proposition to the bank, to the customer. What do you mean the customer? Customer requiring financing to support business activity effectively, efficiently. What banks want? Bank wanted to give away the money obtained from depositors to get profitability while managing liquidity. So in order to do that, as bankers, we try to map BCS. To do that, you need to know what is B, what is C, what is S. You have learned B here, C nutshell, S to be learned. We started telling the BCS model to be applied on a platform where you have sector circle, subsector circle, activity circle. And on these three circles, we try to apply BCS. Once you do this, it completes the credit proposition. So you manage in these circles and these pillars, we can call it as credit management in a more elaborative way. Earlier, in a nutshell, we say managing credit is giving loans and recovery. But when you are expanding it to sector, subsector activities, borrower, credit, and security, it gives you a detailed idea about what we are going to do and what we want to do. Is it clear, Ajini?
Yes, sir. Now it's okay.
What about others? Any difficulty? Any clarification? Eranga? Chatura? Is it all good? Harshani? Prasad? Jude? Is it okay?
It's clear, boss.
Right, good. Then we move to what are the purposes of this credit or these advances? Why we need to give? What are the sectors? Right? Why the customers, require this? Different needs, right? So we try to understand few of requirements, right? As some of you mentioned, purposes of credit, purposes of advance. It could be, that's what actually we have done under the business activity. We have done it, but right, I just wanted to share it again. It could be trading, housing, agri, industry, tourism, SMEs, micro entrepreneurs, consumption. There may be so many requirements, business activities, or rather subsectors, rather sectors. So you take money, you take funds from bank in order to utilize some of the activities in these segments. We try to, take one or two areas and further elaborate for our understanding. When it comes to the trade, you find some customers who are engaged in wholesale and retail. If you go to PETA, there are many commodities players who does wholesale trading. When you go to a village or town, you have so many retailers are engaged in trading. And import and export trading also happening. Some people import and some export. There are some activities are taking place. Distribution, some dealers, agencies. It could be lottery, it could be dialogue, sort of phone cards. It could be a distributable like FMCG, right? Then transport, contract, pledge facilities, real estate. So under the trade, you can see so many applications, right? These are just for your information. But whenever a customer comes and discuss with you, so the customer might tell you, right, I have these type of requirements. So then you need to understand what is his requirement and what's the nature of the requirement, and based on what you could provide him to fulfill his need. Now, example, let's say the customer is into real estate. Now, in the case of real estate, customer can do buying and selling properties. He can buy, he can develop as a land, and he can sell as a bulk, as an entity, as a unit. Or there may be some customers, he will purchase land, he will develop, block out, further develop, sell it as blocks. Two different propositions, but they're into trading, right? Buying and selling. But one guy is buying and selling as it is, we'll have put 3 say. Another guy is buying and selling with value addition to the land. Third one, buying and selling, but block out and selling. Now, 3 business propositions. So 3 customers coming to you and discussing with you something, trade facility, trading requirement to be met now. Now, what you could do? One thing could be buying, selling as bulk. It could be you can approve short-term revolving facility as against say different property. Why? Because you are not going to keep that particular property for a longer period. Say you can ask the customer, give me a property, we'll mark a limit. You can use the limit to purchase properties and sell it. It could be 1 month, 2 month, 3 month requirement. Number 2, buying, developing as a unit and sell. For that again, you can have the same mechanism, but in addition to buying and selling, you can have a permanent overdraft facility because for the development expenses, because he needs some funding for development expenses. So once settled, once sold, he can reduce the POD and he can settle the short-term loan. The third one, you buy, you develop, you block out, you release the block by block. It's not 3 months issue, 3 months requirement. It could be 1 year, 1.5 year, 2 year. Then your proposition could be yes, STL, but you will have the mortgage over the property. And then even you can apportion some part of the short-term loan to develop, to block out, to obtain electricity, to do some road development, reservation, and then you sell it. When you sell, for each block, you do a deed of release and you get the money, gives you facility. You get the point. Now, the same type of business activity, that is trading, but 3 business proposition depending on the customer requirement, depending on the customer credit requirement. So maybe the same customer, but 3 different risk profiles, hence 3 different products, 3 different security arrangements, or rather 2 different security arrangements. Why? That is, I was telling you, need to see relatively on transaction concept. Otherwise, customer, individual, against loan, against property, give a loan, and you can use whatever purposes. No, you can't. Purpose is now different. Hence, though the same customer, facility structuring has now been changed. So that is what we need to keep in mind, right? Whenever you are applying the DCS model, these are the fine tuning that one has to do. So depending on the purpose, depending on the business requirement, depending on the need, the structuring could be changed. Housing. Housing, you can have several purposes. It could be purchasing of a new house, purchasing of a residential property, purchasing of a land and put up a house, construction of a house, own land, renovation, extensions, topping up of the existing loan takeovers. Now see how many requirements. Now let's say you are supposed to develop a housing loan proposition to private sector executives, right? When you are trying to do that, yes, you need to understand the big picture. That's all about housing, right? And with that sector, there may be a couple of borrowers. It could be individual, it could be something partners or joint borrowers, company, right? But there are then requirements now it's going to be different. So when you are developing a housing proposition, housing product, you need to think and incorporate every possible requirement here, because depending on the customer, the requirements could be now different. One guy wanted to purchase a residential property only. Then if you don't have that proposition, then you may not be competitive enough in the market. So this is what we need to think, right? Because customer requirements are different, though it could be individual, though it could be a partner, though it could be a company, because the company may be needing a facility to purchase a land and construction house for their staff. So the company could be a borrower. We might think about, no, companies cannot come and borrow. Why? We think individuals only need housing. No, it is not now. Things have not changed. So now when you have some model approach, then you see, yes, who are the borrowers? Not only individuals. There may be joint borrowers also. There may be limited liability companies also can be borrowers. Then only you understand, and then you map up the need, products, and the securities. Right. So just I'm sharing these things because more in terms of practical, not for exam purposes, right? So whenever you are asked to develop the product paper, right, then you need to think through this way, right? You have to do away with all traditional housing requirement. Probably even those days they have not thought about housing for companies, right? Now you can see, they themselves come up and do housing for their staff. So that's a proposition. So that might be a better proposition than giving loan to one individual. Okay, right. Agri. When comes the agri sector, these are the purposes. It could be paddy, vegetable, fruit, perennial crops, plantation, livestock, fisheries. There are so many, the needs. So you need to understand which is the area, which is the business activity, which is the subsector, and who are the players, what are their requirements, and what are the products we have, how we are going to accommodate while mitigating the bank's risk, right? So for that purpose, yes, we are trying to learn this. Then small and SME or large industries, these are the industry that we come across, right? And then SME businesses, micro, SME, new businesses, young ventures, micro entrepreneurs, there are trade and self-employment, right? So these are some of the segments. I'm not going to go into very detail because you can read through and get an idea, right? Tourism. In tourism also, when somebody would say tourism in the sector, and in the subsector could be, let's say, hotel, right? And then what are the business activity? Construction of hotel, maintenance, refurbishment, tour travel agent services, transportation, right? So getting the point, right? So then when you go on cascading from top to bottom, step by step, then you understand there are so many activities, so many purposes, so many needs. Then you can see who the players, what are the products available for us. Otherwise, it is very difficult for us to go and compete with other players in the market. Let's say now, instead of you doing BCS level approach, instead of you doing cascading from sector subsector activity kind of approach, you say that I am offering, so we are offering housing loan to tourism sector staff. Then here is our product. That is not from down to top approach, bottom up approach. No, it's top bottom approach, which may not be working. Now we need to go to the sector, clients, players, and see their requirement. And then you need to map out while minimizing the risk requirement. Then it will work. Sometimes in general, tourism sector, right, you have to, meet their requirement and could be different to government sector, private sector housing requirement, example. Or rather, when you say, now, we provide housing loan to other sectors and similarly tourism sectors, but in tourism sector, they require sometimes foreign currency denominated loans. Why? Because they may be earning through foreign currency, some tour and travel agents. Then it is better for them to have dollar or euro denominated housing loan, foreign currency housing loan. But you haven't thought about that. When you go into the market only, there is a need. But when you say, no, we only have LKR denominated loans, probably they might say no point because we are earning dollars and then converting and paying may not be a requirement. So then you are losing that segment. What happens to you is you haven't done the target market approach, market research. But if you starting from the top and go to the bottom and then again get their opinion and rework, then you offer to the mass market, probably it will work. Because from the top to bottom, what we'll do is you have some experience, you have done some products, you will see what they require. And then they come up with different requirements. Then you try to map those requirements against what you have. Then you fine tune that. So probably you end up with most attractive product in the market. So just to clear your doubts, how we are going to mapping this type of product development, right? So generally, most of your credit guys are doing this in your bank, but since you are not privy to those areas, I just want to share how it's happening in actual perspective. So consumption, it could be personal, it could be housing, it could be educational, other, it could be very net like that. So there are so many consumption needs. Right. So that's it about the section 1. So any questions before we are moving to the next one? Any questions? Anybody involved in a team of product development in your banks? Were you able to do some contribution? No? All right. Any thoughts where you think it could be useful for rest of the team? Okay. Presume that you have got a basic idea. Actually, this is something very fundamental of the credit. What we have learned is something: what is credit management, why credit is important to an economy, what are the sources, what are the users, and type of borrowers, and type of trade facilities in a very macro view. And also we try to understand some segments, sectors where credit being used, credit being required. So that's what the part 1 of the credit management that I want to share with. Right. Before moving to the part 2, I have a couple of announcements. As we mentioned at the outset, generally classes are starting from 1:30 to 5:30. So today was an exception. So we started 2 o'clock, but next time it's 1:30 to 5:30. And the announcement 2, next Sunday and the week after that Sunday, that is on 11th and 18th, are holidays for IBSL programs. Then our next class could be 25th, 1:30. I will announce it again. And next credit management, certificate course, next class is 25th Sunday, 1:30, not 11th or 18th, because those 2 days are holidays for us. Okay. Right. Now we are moving to the part 2 of, excuse. Sorry about that. Right. We are now trying to discuss more into credit important areas where guidelines for good lending, credit culture, classification of credit facilities, and advances. Because earlier we have not gone into very detail about type of credits. In this session, we are trying to understand, we try to learn detail of that. Hope you can see the presentation. So before moving to the principles or guidelines, we try to give loans to customers based on two key methods. One is security based, asset based. The other one is cash flow, skill based lending. So I will take some time out of you to discuss this further, because there may be some more understanding we need on this. When you say security based or asset based lending versus the cash flow based lending, there is no hard and fast rule to say that this is correct, this is bad. When you say asset, when you say security based lending, is predominantly we depend on asset security, like cashback, gold loan, owning. What do you mean by that? So we are not thinking on how customer is going to repay, when he is going to repay, what's the purpose of loan proceeds. We are not considering those things in security base, asset base. Hope you are getting. So you can write down notes if required. Right? So take example, cashback. Customer come to your counter and say that I have this much of deposit in your bank. I want 90 to 95% of that. So you over the counter will approve against the letter of set off and give the money then and there. So are we asking the customer what is the end use? How you are going to repay? Right? When you are going to repay? Are you assigning cash flows? So are we very much interested on those? No. Why? We know for sure, in case if the customer is not going to pay, we have some underlying security for us to recover our outstanding. Similar to pawning. If the customer wanted to do pawning, are you asking a whole lot of questions? How we are going to repay? What is the purpose? Right? And when you are going to do this, can I see the cash flows? Can I, give the money directly to your purpose? No, we are not going to ask. If it is so, the customer might say, no, don't ask that sort of silly questions. If you can't give, I'll go to another bank and get this pawn. Because means we are predominantly dependent on security, asset, than other aspects of lending. We are not going to here say it is good or bad, but we can identify that sort of lending practices are taking place. One. Number two, cash flow based lending. What is that? In generally, there are some customers who come to you and ask money to fund their working capital against their stocks, against their debtors, right? So then you check what's the requirement. What is the stock level? What is the debtors level? So based on that, you try to give some money. which is much better than asset-based. Why? You can have a control. You know for sure what's the end use. You know for sure how it is going to repay. Realization of checks, realization of stocks will settle your debt. So that type of cash flows, that type of lending we call cash flow based lending. So if you see it in other way, there may be lending categories which the loan is being serviced through cash flows. There are some other type of lending where lending is recovered through realization of security. That's what two ways of lending I have given. But in addition to these, sometimes you come across fee-based lending. What are the fee-based lending? Any thoughts? Any types of credit you might come across the fee-based lending? Any idea? One of you can suggest any example for fee-based. Now we know what is asset-based, security-based. We know cash flow-based, like working capital financing are cash flow-based. Do you come across any fee-based lending products in your bank? Ireshi, Jude, Erang, any idea? What are the fee-based lending? Any example? Achini, Ashini, any fee-based lending? අදහසක් නැහැ. fee based එහෙම කිව්වහම මොනවා හරි අපිට තියෙනවද? ඉරේෂ් කියන්න බලන්න.
Pawning.
Is it fee based lending? අපි දැන් when you say asset based lending අපි කිව්වා is a predominantly asset එක back කරගත්ත product එකක්. Pawning is coming under that. Erang, any example for fee base?
Credit cards and debit cards.
Debit cards. Yes, debit cards.
Bank guarantee, commission.
Yeah, you are correct. Bank guarantee, letter of credit, shipping guarantee, performance bonds. What do you mean? All those products are what? All are off-balance sheet products, which are not booked in your balance sheet. Contingent liability product, which provides you fee income. Right? Now, earlier we talked about asset-based product and cash flow-based product are interest income-based product. They are booked in your balance sheet. Right? There's a bit of risk because cash going out. The rest is fee-based, which is not booked on your balance sheet. But you can earn income. These days, actually, many banks are pursuing fee-based product. Why? Low risk. If you can offer letter of credit, guarantees, you can get commission income. Right? You can get fee income. Because it's like, say, interest income is coming down these days, then you can increase your total income by offering fee-based products. So those type of lending we call fee-based lending. So now we have asset security-based lending, We have cash flow based lending, we have fee based lending. Just for your understanding, because sometimes you may be required to describe what is asset, what is collateral, sorry, what is cash flow based, what is fee based lending, and give some examples to those. So then you know, right? It's very practical, but in case of examination purposes, if they give, so you are in a position to now answer. Okay. Any?
You can get the pay order when you issue in the bank draft. Also, can get the fee-based lending.
Yes, you can. But they are actually now we are not calling them as fee-based products. But all the other, even the term loan, even working capital loan, you are earning fee income like processing fee or whatever restructuring charges and all that. That's a fee income. But generally, we say fee-based products are where the facilities which are not booked in the balance sheet, which is like contingent liabilities. But agree?
Then,
yeah.
Then, sir, most of the banks is rent of the lockers.
Yes, that's again. You are getting a in the warning in the case of safety lockers. Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean that is like how you earn the other income, right? That again will come to as not the interest income. That will add to your other income scenario. That's the fee income, right? But when you say fee-based funding, is predominantly the products which earn you fee only, right? When you say credit card, it's not only the fee, it's a interest income also. But bank guarantee, a shipping guarantee, predominantly we will end up with fee income. So we try to understand that type of products cluster into the fee-based products. So having said that, we are not here to say we do only asset lending, we do only cash flow lending, we do only fee-based lending. No, sometimes you can see a combination of those things in your product offering. Example, you offer cash flow based working capital loan against the property. No harm, right? Where you have asset features and cash flow features. That's how you manage your risk, mitigate your risk by introducing some collateral, right? අදුරගන්න අපිට මේක fee based, මේක asset based, මේක cash flow based කියලා කිව්වට practical scenario එකේදී මේ තුනම එකතු කරලා දෙන product එකක් වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. Where you get fee income, where you get interest income, and asset is also there to minimize your credit risk, right? But in theory, you can say asset collateral based products කියලා જાතියක් තියෙනවා, fee based product කියලා જાතියක් තියෙනවා, and finally cash flow based කියලා જાතියක් තියෙනවා. Right? Any questions? Okay. Right. Now we try to understand lending principles and best practices. Then අපි කලින් පාර කතා කරානේ why the credit is important, how you try to map borrower credit security, and also now we just learned about lending methodologies. That's true, but whatever you do in credit, you need to understand, be aware with some fundamentals in lending, best practices in lending, because without these, it is very difficult to structure the credit. අපි කියන BCS model එක හරි. ඒ BCS model එකට map කරන්න ගියාට පස්සේ අපි දැනගන්න ඕනේ මෙන්න මේ වගේ දේවල් ටිකක් සම්පූර්ණ කරන්න. මෙන්න මේ වගේ දේවල් ටිකක් consider corrupted. What are those? Safety, liquidity, profitability, spread, purpose, end use, need-based financing, viability-based financing, own stake, national priority. So these are some fundamentals. Now we'll take one by one and we'll try to understand each principle. Okay. Give me a minute. So what is safety? Safety is a major concern for the banker. So ability of the banker to critically assess the borrower's capacity to repay the borrowed amounts together with the interest. In present context, this fact is very important. Safety. Safety of the funds. Because now we were telling earlier that we get the money from depositors as one of the sources. Then, yeah, somebody was responding and say, we are here to lend the money. When you say lend the money, it is our responsibility to get the same collected, not only capital, together with interest. Then if you are not going to do that, means you are doing the injustice to the depositor in the first place. Injustice to the rest of the stakeholders of this bank, including the shareholders. If you're not collected, it going bad, non-performing, provisioning, lesser profits, lesser dividends. I mean, so many problems. So safety is very much key. Especially in these days, we see the external environment are not so great. So probably we need to be very watchful in collecting the money we granted. So whenever you want to satisfy a borrower's requirement, one of the important factors you need to keep in mind is the safety of funds. That's a first principle. So always it is the responsibility of banker to collect the money timely collect the money together with interest, right? If you're not going to do that, means you're not following that major principle, fundamental item in granting credit. Number 2, liquidity. What is the liquidity? So liquidity is something where, because again, you request, you get the money from the borrower, sorry, depositor, and lend the borrower, called financial intermediation. අතරමැදිකරුවගේ කාර්යභාරය. Let's say now customer who is the depositor wanted money back. You should be in a position to give the money with the due interest as and when demanded by the depositor. So in turn, if you have granted that money to the borrowers and now you can't get that money as and when required, then there is a problem. So as a banker now you need to take care of that money, not the safety, not only the safety, liquidity as well. Liquidity in the sense, it could be something where you try to get the money, say you get the money from the depositor in short term, repaid back, but you lend for the long term. Then there is obvious mismatch. Short-term deposit, long-term advances. There's a mismatch. You can't do that. You need to manage the depositor's money in order to ensure the liquidity. You can give to short-term, medium term, and long term. මේ තුන් ආකාරයට මට ණය දෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි අපි බැලන්ස් කරන්න ඕනේ ඕනම වෙලාවක depositor කෙනෙක් සල්ලි ඉල්ලුවොත් දෙන්න පුළුවන් වෙන විදිහට ඔයාගේ assets ටික mature වෙන විදිහට හදා ගන්න ඕනේ. එතන assets කියලා කියන්නේ loans and advances. Liability කියලා කියන්නේ deposits. ඒතර asset liability mismatch එකක් නැති වෙන විදිහට තමයි banking operations ටික අපි කරන්නේ. Lending operations ටික අපි කරන්නේ. Credit management ටික අපි කරන්නේ. So that's what we say, the liquidity also important. Now, take example. When you want to purchase something, if you don't have money in your purse, මොකද වෙන්නේ? You're not at liquidity, right? You have money in the bank. You have money in the fixed deposit. You want to pay money, say, next week. If you don't have money in your current account, savings account, which you can get it over a counter, then it's a liquidity problem. මාස 3කින් මාස 6කින් mature deposit තිබ්බා කියන එක, you have assets. හැබැයි liability එක match කරගන්නවට බැරි වෙනවා. Then you are not liquidity. You don't have liquidity. You get the point. So in lending, one of the best principle, liquidity. Safety, liquidity. Third one, profitability. අපි මොනවා කරත් වැඩක් නැහැ. අපි transaction එක profitable නැත්තම්. We are not here to do a CSR. Because CSR කරන්න පුළුවන් if you have money. Because this is not your money. This is the money you get from depositors. You have to pay back with due interest. එතකොට you need to manage your cost of funds. That I was telling you, you need to get the money different sources. Managing your cost of funds. It could be current account, savings account, minor savings account, term deposit, debentures, capital. එතකොට හැම එකෙන්ම ගත්ත සල්ලි වල තියෙනවා cost of fund එක. Then you try to match it, that funds, with the market when acquiring customers. හැමෝටම අඩුවට දීලා බෑ. There may be very good customers. We give cost of funds plus 1%. There are some risky customers. Cost of funds plus 4%, 5%. There you get the margin. Risk-based pricing because if the risk is higher in terms of your customers, then you should not offer your advances at very attractive rates, very low rates. You need to have some premium on risk. You getting the point? So that is what we call profitability, right? I mean, it is common for any business, but in banking also, it is very much important. So safety, liquidity, profitability are three key important principles in lending. Whatever you are going to do, yes, you need to manage this stuff. If not, you can't do this banking business. Maybe earlier you take about BCS model. Now, let's say individual asking for short-term loan to purchase paddy against stocks. Now come to the pricing. Similarly, established company asking loan for the same purpose. Now come to the pricing. Now, depending on these two individuals, based on your analysis, risk is high with the individual. Could be single person, could be key man risk, could be health condition, could be lack of experience. I mean, a lot of things. But the company, based on your analysis, maybe better proposition, better position in terms of individual, because they have some asset, net worth, a couple of other projects, not only this one. So then, when come to the pricing, the risk is lower in the company as against the individual. So cost plus 4% to the individual, cost plus 3% to the company. But both cases we are earning profits, but a profit is linked to the pricing, is linked to the riskiness, risk levels. It's better that you can negotiate with the company cost plus 4. That is, super normal then. But there are lesser likelihood you can do, because they also know how the market behaves, right? How is their standing? The company knows. So if bank A does not give whatever the rates they prefer, they can go to the bank B because they are good for that pricing. The risk levels good for that pricing. So profitability is very key. You need to manage that depending on the individual and the riskiness, nature of the business, activity, security. So based on that, you can decide the profitability. In the same course, individual against property, a company without a property. Probably now you can offer the same pricing. Why? Individual facility against property, structural risk has now come down. Though there's an individual credit risk, due to the offering of a security, risk levels now come down or equal to the company risk levels. Then you can offer at a lesser margin because overall risk is comparatively equal to the company. You get my point? So these fundamentals are important. So you need to understand not only a borrower perspective, not only type of credit perspective, not only security perspective. So you need to interconnect and see what's the big picture, what's the complete picture, what's the total picture, and what's the total risk that you are talking about. And the risk-based pricing will give you adequate profitability. We sometimes call this as calculator risk. අපි අර calculator risk එකක් ගන්නවා හැම කියලා කියන්නේ ඔන්න ඔය වගේ කතාවකට. Profitability එක high වෙන තරමට හොඳයි. හැබැයි profitability එක high කරගන්නම ගිහිල්ලා අපිට නරකම customers ලා on board කරගෙන හරියන්නේත් නැහැ. Profitability එක අඩු වෙයි කියලා නැත්නම් profitability එක risk levels අඩුයි කියලා හොඳම customers ලා onboard කරගෙන හරියන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද ඒගොල්ලන්ට cost එක plus 0.5යි තමයි හොඳම customers ලා අපිට. ඒගොල්ලෝ විතරකුත් බෑ. අරගොල්ලෝ විතරකුත් බෑ. We need to have mix of everybody. ඒක තමයි මෙතනදි කියන්නේ. We need to have a mix of portfolio, mix of customers. All eggs in one basket. You should be doing it. දැන් අපි personally ගත්තත් අපි එහෙමනේ. අපේ deposits එකක් තියෙනවා නම් ඔක්කොම ගිහිල්ලා finance company එක අපි දැම්ම කියලා will it good move? No. Good that you have part of that in a bit of that organization. And better also you keep it in a bank where we see a lesser risk. Right? එහෙම තමයි deposit distribute කරන්නේ. Lending ගත්තත් එහෙමයි. You can't put everything into individual customers, everything into agri sector, everything into maybe particular district. If something has happened, maybe sector, maybe individual, maybe product, like him we have some experience. Remember some time back, so many banks invested a lot on owning portfolio, owning product. So suddenly gold prices crash, like historical low. Then many banks face loss on owning portfolio. They impaired lot. They provided lot. So why? Everything in one basket. That is the concentration risk. It could be sector, it could be individual, it could be branch, it could be product, it could be area. එතකොට එකම තැනකට අපි යමු වුණාම එතනදී මොනවා හරි ගැටලුවක් ආවොත් ඒක නිසා ඇති වෙන risk එකක් ඒකට අපුවා concentration risk කියලා. So you need to minimize that. Good that you manage profitability, liquidity, safety ඔක්කොම හරි. හැබැයි concentration risk also to be avoided. Strike a balance among short, medium and long-term loans. That's on product perspective, right? Maybe you have the tenor perspective, or maybe product perspective, maybe customer specific, area specific. You name it, there may be so many things that it could be leading to concentration risk. So you need to minimize those concentration risk, right? Very important perspective when you are undertaking lending. You need to manage, keep an eye on these areas. Purpose. What is this? Now, whatever said and done, we need to ensure the money is to be utilized for given purpose. It should be legally valid when only. It should not be speculative, right? It should be for ethical, right? So there are so many things that one has to be aware with. Say there is a customer who's seeking finance from you for his company or manufacturing operations, and you come across that the particular customer is deploying minor labors. Is it ethical? Is it legal? Are you doing the right thing? No. You can't do that type of funding. You can't fund that type of customers because he is doing unethical thing, illegal thing. Or a customer is into casino, money laundering, some other illegal activities. You can't fund, right? So then it should be approved purposes, not for speculative, not for illegal. In most cases, banks have a kind of a policy, approved credit policy, which outline what to do, what not to do. Purposes are clear enough. Purposes spelled out. These are, the areas that one can undertake financing. These are the areas one cannot undertake. So very important purpose, right? So as a credit officer, yes, you need to be aware with what are the allowable purposes. End use. Why this is important? It's another principle. Ensure the money lent has been used for the purpose for which it was granted. Yes, there are some occasions like cashback loan, gold loans. You may not be able to ensure this because it's a product features, product restriction itself, right? When you say cashback, his own cash, he can take and whatever purpose he can use. Yeah, we have a limitation, but there are some other occasions we can always ensure the end use. Why? One thing is it's ethical. It has to be because it helps to support the economy or maybe the intended purpose. That's all correct. Again, important thing is then if the loan is not used for intended purpose, then the scenario could be he or she or the business entity cannot generate adequate income to service the debt. That is also another repercussion. Say you give money to purchase some raw materials, particular customer may have used this to do some personal matters. Now, no money to purchase stocks, hence unable to continue with business. It's a huge risk. So one has to ensure the end use of funding. Okay. Need-based financing. What is that? When a customer wanted money, he or she come and meet you and provide you his financing requirement. And then we as professional bankers, we need to fund the requirement on need base. Because over financing is also not good. Under financing is also not good. Why? When you say over financing, customer can get your money and invest in some irrelevant activity. Ultimately, it doesn't generate adequate money to repay your debt. Under financing means the customer may or pretend that he need a lower money to get the loan approved, and when carrying out the transaction, he could not complete the venture, project, business requirement. Then he can't come back to the bank and he could go to, say, money lender also and get the money at a higher cost. Ultimately, bank, customer both in trouble because due to the unnecessary charges on the business. So need-based financing is again very critical. We need to ensure at any cost because this is like important as purpose of the credit. Then viability-oriented lending versus security-oriented lending. Advances should be granted based on the profitability of the business and the creditworthiness of the customer. Right, what is this? Now, though we mention that we can find out, we may come across security-based lending as well as viability-oriented lending, but we need always keep in our mind viability-oriented lending is the most important or most doable thing. Why? Because we give credit to a customer of the presumption that customer use the funds to support the business and in turn generate funds to service the debt in return. Or we never expect a customer could service the loan by realizing, by selling off the property. That you shouldn't be doing. It have to be avoided at any cost again. Because if you think the client could pay by disposing the property, then you need to rethink your original credit decision. Why? Because all the time, you have to take the credit decision based on customers' creditworthiness, customers' ability to repay, customers' willingness to repay. Those are the parameters. So based on that, you need to take your call. Right? Security is only an insurance. That means it's good. It's a cushion in case of an emergency, like insurance. Let's say you take insurance. The car lease කරගත්තට පස්සේ අපි insure කරලා කරන්නේ ඇයි? අදිසිය හැපුණොත් insurance එකෙන් claim කරගන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට මට කරදරයක් වෙන්නේ නැතුව insurance එක bank එකේ cost එක නැත්නම් bank එකට තියෙන payment එකත් බලනවා කියලා. එහෙම නැතුව insurance එක ගත්ත කියලා මම හප්පනවා හැම වෙලෙම කියන මානසිකත්වයෙන් මම යනවද නැහැ. ඒක insurance එක. ඒ වගේම තමයි security එක. Give a loan based on the creditworthiness, based on the willingness to repay, based on the capability to repay. ඒක බලලා දෙනවා. Security, yes, it's nice to have, good to have. It's a commitment, it's an obligation. It's a motivation for customers to repay. Yes, it's a pressure point. If he's not going to say, you will send a letter saying that legal action will be taken. Auction එකක් කරනවා කියලා කියන්න පුළුවන්. Then customer pressure points. Customer say now no, එහෙනම් මොකක් හරි කරන්න ඕනේ. Right? But you need not to think at any time, if he is not going to pay, I will sell you a property. If it comes to your mind at the first place, then it's not a good credit decision. So always we need to focus on viability oriented, feasibility of the facility, viability oriented of the credit. That's another important principles in lending. Own stake, what is that? Borrower should have a reasonable financial contribution in the business venture. Because now, whenever you are want to evaluate a customer for a credit facility, you need to see how much he has invested on the business, how much his equity in the business, what it means, his commitment, his ability to conduct the business, his responsibility towards the business. Right? So it gives you an understanding that the customer during the kind of period was doing the business, was able to make some contribution, reinvestment towards the business. In the other side, it tells you the risk level of the business. If higher equity component, higher contribution, of the business toward the business means lower risk to you, because debt to equity is a lesser component. But vice versa, it talks about higher risk levels. So on stake equity or capital is an important parameter in case of a lending decision. Last one, national priorities. It is very important principle. Why? Because whatever you are going to do, it's not the individual transactions. It is not the individual business. It's not a micro proposition. Ultimately, it should reach to macro proposition. As a bank, as an organization, as a system of banks, as a country, everybody try to support each other while maintaining these principles. So ultimately, collectively, we will help to the economy. So within that concept, we have identified some priority sectors. It could be agriculture, it could be export sector, it could be women entrepreneurs, it could be SME sector, it could be something about tourism sector, right? So then, because of the national plan, we have identified to promote these sectors. So then it's your responsibility to identify entrepreneurs, enterprises by financing, right? So as a bank, you support, and collectively, we see the benefit of this individual heads. So these are the credit fundamentals, credit principles, best practices we always try to comply with. As earlier we discussed, some BCS model, some credit fundamentals, some sectors, and whatever said and done, these things has to be fulfilled. So without compromising these fundamentals, these principles, you can't reach your organizational goals. Because why I'm telling is, let's say if you are not focusing on profitability, it's not the correct lending. If you are not managing your liquidity, this is not the advisable lending. If you are not looking after the safety of your funds, nobody would say you are a good bank, right? So these fundamentals are important, critical. And then based on that, you need to take a correct call. So your lending policies, procedures, programs, credit manuals, and everything should be focused on these priorities, these fundamentals. Okay. Right. Before moving to further, any questions? Any questions on what we have done so far? Eranga, Chatura? Any questions? Achini? Any gray areas? Anything that you are not comfortable with? Further clarifications required? Ireshi? Kushan? Prasad? All good? Oh,
It's all fine.
all are okay. Right. Then what about others? Is it clear?
Yes, sir, clear.
Okay, right. So I will take another 2 or 3 slides, and then we will wind it up for today. And since that next week that we will try to start from that what we stopped today, right? Uh, so the lending proposition is basically, now since that we have undertaken some we have discussed the credit principle. So we see what's a lending proposition. That is, the lending or the borrowing proposition should come from the customer. So the customer should start with what is required. He will come and he meets you as a banking officer, and what is basically he required. Then as a bank, you need to ensure, you need to see whether you are okay with the proposition or whether you are not in line with what is required. So two things: customer is coming up with specific lending or borrowing proposition. So as a bank, you can take independent call on whether to give or whether not to give. Our decision could based on 3 areas, that is accepting as it is, accepting with changes, not accepting. So it is up to you to decide. So probably we accept as it is because we see so everything in line. The customer is okay, good for the exposure, right? So we are happy with the lending principles put forward by the request, and then we will proceed. Or we need some more changes to collateral, to structure, to pricing, to purpose, to, and those things also you can do. Finally, you can say it's not acceptable. It is not acceptable because it's not in line with your credit appetite or risk appetite. Maybe some other bank would come and accept the proposal, where your bank may say we are not happy, we are not interested. Okay, right. Then borrowing proposition, when the borrower comes and put his credit request, it will cover about amount, purpose, repayment period, sources of incomes, like so many things that he would outline to you. I want this much of amount. This is for the purpose, to the capex, to working capital, to whatever, and then I will repay in 4 year, 5 year, 6 year. Then sources of income, whatever, through your sales related one, through other income, how it has been generated. So that's what the borrower would come and tell you. Then our responsibility, as outlined earlier also, we need to go by the fundamentals we discussed, the principles we discussed. So based on that, you will say accepted, not accepted, accepted with changes. So basically, when you take this call, you not only map in the BCS, but you see the outline, underline fundamentals. right? So based on that principle, you will approve or reject the particular case. Bankers reach lending very often based on experience, certain feeling that the loan will be repaid in full. It's an intuition. But the experience should come from learning and applying the principles of good lending thoroughly. Remember, I was telling at the upfront, when a DGM comes and he might say, this is a good customer, okay for exposure, the creditworthy, we will do kind of thing. It's intuition. How the intuition created? The intuition has been created after thorough application of credit principles. Through the experience coupled with this credit principles, then only he will say, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. So what we have to do is, we need to make that as an art. Yes, it's a science, but through your experience, you can make it art. Credit is an art. After thorough application of principles with your experience. So, final decision, yeah, it could be intuition, but remember, intuition is backed with these principles of lending. We just learned. Okay. Right. Though I wanted to discuss this credit culture today, I'm not going to do it basically. So we have time, but I think the first day it could be too much for you, right? Then we can discuss it next week, not next week, the 25th. Further on that, because we want to go into bit detail what is credit culture, and depending on organizations how it's going to change like that. So we will discuss that in next session. In the meantime, any questions, any clarifications you have up to now? What we
Sir, in the next session, we can upload the tute before the Sunday, at least Friday, because it's easy to get when hard copy and write something important points.
Right. So what I'll do is, maybe today that it's the first attempt. Actually, there may be some kind of issues taken place. So I'll ask IPSL staff to do it even very soon. So on all three my whatever sessions, to upload it into the Google Classroom. So you can get them referred, and then you can be ready with any questions once you go through the presentations. We'll do watching.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Right. So basically, today that is a first session. We have not done very much deeper, the detailed areas. I mean, difficult areas. Maybe very sort of easy, but again, very important stuffs we discussed, starting from what is credit management, sources, users, importance of credit, and then some sectors where we understand how the credit could be used, and then also we touch upon a type of borrowers and type of credits in brief. Then we move to the fundamentals or the credit principles, right? And then we ended up with some kind of how banks taking decisions on borrowers' proposition as against bankers' responsibility. So next week we could start from credit culture and we move to the rest of the area where type of credits and all that. So I invite you to go through maybe the today's content, and we'll ask, as Sachin requested, to ask the IBSL people to upload whatever the material upfront, so that you can go through and get an idea while we are delivering the sessions. If you don't have questions, so we will wind it up for today. And thank you very much for joining me today. We have spent like 3 to 3.5 hours. So next week, we'll make it more further interesting, and try to share as much as experience. And you also can contribute, since that getting to know each other. So maybe a couple of you spoke today, and I invite the rest of the students to come forward and discuss sort of issues. Then it will be beneficial for everybody. Then since that we are not meeting for prior to the new year, I'll make this opportunity to wish you a very happy Sinhala and Tamil New Year. Wish all your dreams come true, and also wish a very safe time ahead with this pandemic around. So again, then thank you so much for joining me today, and we will meet 25th Sunday 1:30 sharp. Right. Thank you again.